Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be showing you how I created this cupcake face Halloween or fancy dress look, and I hope you enjoy. So I started off by blocking out my brows and I glued them using a Pritt stick, going against the grain first and then with the grain, and then I brushed them upwards so that they would lay as flat as possible against the skin. And then once they were dry, I patted over with some peach coloured concealer to colour correct any cool tones coming through from the brow. I then set that with a translucent powder and a powder puff. Again, I then layered on more concealer and really packed it on there to completely block out the brow. And then again set that, but using a coloured powder this time. And I grabbed a fan brush to brush away any excess powder on top. So then for the actual cupcake, I started mapping out my placement using a white pencil so that I could adjust it with wipes as I went along. You want to be careful with going across your nose because it can kind of distort the angle of the line, so I was careful to look straight ahead and get that line going straight across. And I had started by mapping out the top of the casing and the top of the bun, and then I drew in the end of the casing, so the diagonal lines coming down my cheeks, and then moved on to the layers of icing. And then once I had all of that mapped out, I started filling the actual bun part. So I used a foundation that was too dark for me, and you want something that has that kind of golden undertone to it. And I just shaded that in using a concealer buffer brush. And if you're interested in any of the specific products that I'm using, I'll have them all listed on my blog, which as always will be linked down below. So going back to my white pencil, I then added in the squiggly zigzags for the top of the casing. And I coloured in all of that area with a white cream product and blended all of that in to cover. And I went back in and touched up my edges to make sure that they were still nice and sharp. Once that whole shape was filled in, I then set it all over with a white powder. Now I then moved on to filling in the lines of the icing, but I would actually do this at a later stage after colouring in the icing, and you'll see that I redo it later in the tutorial. Then the shading of the casing, I took a light taupe eyeshadow and a slightly fluffy angled shadow brush, and I started shading in those lines, and you want to place these at the point where the zigzag goes up, because this is the point where the casing kind of recedes. So then to soften these, I went over them with the white powder that I set the white with, and that just made them less harsh. So moving on to the icing, I then filled it all in using a light pink cream, and I switched to a smaller, more precise brush to make sure the brows were all covered. And as I was saying before, this is the point where you can then draw in your lines on icing using a white again. I then went back over them with the pink cream I was using and a smaller brush to soften those out and make them less harsh. I then set all of that pink using a baby pink powder. Then taking a darker pink on a crease brush, I added some shading in the icing along one side of those white lines that I did, and making sure to blend them out to get a nice gradient effect. So at this point I started adding some shading around the shape so that it stood out a little bit more, but I did end up going darker, and you'll see that later. For the cherry, I just took a red lip pencil and created a circle just to the side of the tip of the icing. And then I completely filled it in. I added a touch of shading underneath using the darker pink as well. And then going back to my white pencil, I added a highlight and the cherry. I also set the red pencil with a red powder. I then finished adding my shading on this side, but again I go darker at the end. I then did a simple winged liner using a black liquid liner. And I added some long fluttery lashes off camera. For the sprinkles, I used liners of different colours, and I kind of concentrated them more towards the top of the icing. So So as I was saying, I went darker with the shading, and this was because I wanted there to be more of a contrast between my skin and the bun colour that was basically a foundation. So I had originally shaded with a light taupe shade, but I took that taupe and I coloured in all of the exposed skin, and then went back in with a darker brown to shade around the edges of the shape to make it stand out that bit more. And that is the finished look. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed, don't forget to give a thumbs up and subscribe for more videos, and I will see you on the next one. See you guys.